It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are discussing When They Burned the Butterfly by Wenyi Lee. Alexis, would you like to do the plot of this one? Because I don't want to do the plot of this one because the plot of this one is quite complicated.
The plot of this one is quite complicated, and so, spoiler-free plot or... spoiler-free as of the first few chapters plot. So Adeline is your standard Christian schoolgirl in 1972 Singapore with, your usual schoolgirl problems of being kind of an outcast and the popular girls don't like you and you want to set everything on fire, up to and including God. And this is only made slightly more complicated by the fact that Adeline has magic that allows her to set things on fire, and which she doesn't really understand. And she, like many teenagers, deals with her emotions by picking fights and going out at night and, going to places where probably a schoolgirl shouldn't go. And then she comes back from one of these to find her house is on fire, her mother is dead, and her family has actually been involved in both folk religion and organized crime. And she gets, in an attempt to understand what is going on, she gets pulled into the folk religion, God underworld of 1970s Singapore.
Yes, absolutely. And if that sounds fun to you, boy, this is a good one. I'm just going to get out in front of it. I think this is a good one.
Yes. I guess full disclosure, we got this one as an arc. We didn't actually make any promises about what we were going to do with the arc, but so it's not even in exchange for an unbiased review. They just sort of gave us one. But as it turns out, we really liked this one. So
this is true. Are there wizards in this book?
There are so many wizards in this book.
Are there lesbians in this book?
There are quite a few lesbians in this book.
Oh, yeah. This one is Wizards versus Lesbians.
And do they fight?
Yes.
Boy, do they fight. Basically, everyone is fighting everyone. This is extremely Wizles.
It's a nice, tall, refreshing glass of Wizles is this book. So why should you read it? Besides what we've established already, which is that it's quite good.
It's quite good. I mean, so first of all, 1970s Singapore is a great setting for a novel just because there's so much interesting politics going on just in the background and cultural stuff. Also, this has, I think, why should you read this book? If you liked Blackwater Sister, if you liked this sort of, this is the real world, but Chinese folk religion is a little more present than... and is present and more widely acknowledged. This is even more so. It's got violence, it's got arson, it's got lesbians, it's got politics, it's got it's a great. It's got the Jianghu.
Yeah, I would say that if you are like me or a person who really enjoys a book with themes.
This has themes.
This has themes out the wazoo, but it doesn't get so caught up in its themes that it forgets to be entertaining.
This is a consistently entertaining
yeah, it's
novel.
full of twists and turns and action and and new plot things happen, but it never feels like it's getting lost. Everything feels like it, sort of follows naturally. And at the same time, it continues to circle around and hold its themes right up to you and be like, do you see what this all means? We're doing the metaphor here and, I'm going to remind you of that. And then we're going to have another interesting, action sequence or argument or foray into a different part of the underworld. And the pacing is frenetic and essentially never slows down, even over the course of what is a relatively, chunky book in terms of its length. It doesn't feel as long as it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is both entertaining and interesting and fun to talk about. So That's why I would say, why you should read it. As far as why you shouldn't read it goes.
Well, we'll get to the content warnings in a minute.
Yes.
But...
it made me hungry.
Yeah, okay. There's that. I think It is a little long. It is a little longer, I think, than it quite needs to be. There for me there was some parts about 2/3 the way through where it was starting to feel, or I was starting to wonder, okay, is this going anywhere? Is this going to wrap up? There's so much going on. Do you know? And I think that the author does a good job of sort of juggling, internal gang politics with external gang politics with also just this is still a teenage girl. But occasionally it did to me. It felt like, all right, I want to get to what's going to happen next. It is very tense and stressful, which
Mm.
I guess if what you want is a cozy, then don't read this.
It does threaten to burst at seams occasionally, and like whether it does or not is probably going to be up to the taste of the individual reader.
Yeah.
But yes, no, it this is also just obviously a story where bad things happen, um, and so you have
Yes.
to be prepared for that.
So many bad things happen. Also, um, I think that overall the story has a fairly realistic and nuanced approach to organized crime. It does not glorify organized crime in the way that a lot of gangster stories do. But at the same time, it is a story where all the protagonists are members of organized crime, and if that's a real issue for you, then this will annoy you.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I want to talk about when we get to the spoiler zone, because I think that the way that it handles that specific issue is very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so content warnings.
Well, people get killed in all kinds of nasty ways. People get tortured.
There's boy, is there body horror.
Yeah, people get body shamed to death. In a sort of very specific, like this is about beauty standards and the way that they can kill you, kind of a way.
Yes, there's gays get buried, sex workers get buried. There's so much violence. There's no on the page sexual assault, but this is happening in an environment where sexual assault is clearly very common.
Mhm.
There's a lot of non-consensual drugging.
Yes, and a lot of this book takes place in brothels, where you get the sense that there's the people who entered the brothels didn't really have a choice in the matter. So
Yes, there's a variety of human trafficking. Yeah, and just again, people, so many people die in so many unpleasant ways.
yeah, I think that just about covers it. Um, I, I'm trying to like, do any cute animals die? I don't think any cute animals die.
Not that I can remember.
That's pretty much the only thing that you're not going to get out of there.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep that in mind.
Hmm.
But having said that, shall we get on to discussing it?
Let's.
We're going to the spoiler zone to find what's going on in the crucible of nationhood. It's probably violent and depraved, but that is how nations are made. So let's start with the organized crime bit, because I think that
Yeah.
this book does a really good job of like presenting the both the attractions and the like day-to-day misery of the demi-monde, basically.
Hmm.
It is simultaneously showing how like violent and awful and sort of barbaric on a day-to-day level existence within sort of the Chinatown, triad zone in Singapore is.
I mean, Singapore is basically a Chinatown
Yes.
in Malaysia, so it is like this is pretty early on in its independence.
Mhm. Well, I mean, there is a specific Chinatown neighborhood in Singapore in which most of this book takes
Yes.
place. That's in the text. That's all that I'm saying
Yes.
about that.
Though really, I mean, it is not just limited to that neighborhood in Singapore.
No, but that's where the majority of our action, and that's where all of our gangs are headquartered, or most of our gangs.
Except when we go off to like the little islands and stuff like that.
So, but it does a good job of just showing how like brutal and bleak and amoral and nasty and life in this area can be, but also demonstrating that when there is no place for example, a gay woman in this society, or like even a woman who, you know, can have some sort of independent means and existence in the society, this is where you can find that. And so, sort of the overall arc of the book is this lawless area is being gradually encroached and shrunk by the emerging, like, to sort of unitary Singaporean government as Singapore becomes a police state, uh, and that there is something to be mourned in that sort of shrinking of possibilities. There's a wistfulness to it, you know, while at the same time showing just like not shying away at, not romanticizing what is being lost at all, you know.
Yeah, well, I think it romanticizes it a little bit.
Well, I mean, giving
But
it
does,
actual magic is certainly
right. Giving it actual magic, you know, but at the same time, it does. The book does not pretend that, you know, that this is that even the all girl gang that has, you know, been created partly to be a home for former sex workers and trans women and lesbians and all of these young women who can't fit in. First of all, you know, it's clear that the casualty rate in this gang is very high. But also, one of the things I actually really liked about how it handles the organized crime is that it starts out being very romanticized. Like, these girls are so cool from, yes, you know, because we're seeing all this through Adeline's eyes, and they are just so cool. And then as she's, you know, and then like, as she joins them, she gets to see, first there's internal politics, and then you start to see them shake down people for protection money. And the people that they're shaking down are also vulnerable women. Mm-hmm. But there's, you know, and they're getting shaken down. You get to see them just do random acts of violence because they're lashing out. And you also get to watch their morals decay. So like you get, you know, there's a whole thing of, oh, no, we're the good gangsters. We would never threaten somebody's child. And they say this multiple times, and then they go and threaten a doctor's child. Yes. And he dies horribly as a result of being, you know, of giving into their threats. And, you know, oh, we would never do this to a vulnerable woman. Well, they kidnap a woman and her son. And again, this comes back to bite everybody. Mm. But, you know, you get to watch all of these things that they claim are part of their moral code are really just really just convenient fictions to help create the mythology of their gang. And I mean, they have an actual goddess backing them, so there's more to the mythology than just, you know, this is our code of behavior. But I think it does a good job of showing that there's really no such thing as, you know, a true code of honor in this kind of environment. People can pretend, but...
Exactly. No, there is no, like, you know, Robin Hood gang. There's no, you know, oh, we would never touch drugs, like in The Godfather kind of, you know, thing here that's not immediately been shown to be a lie when the shit hits the fan. And that last bit where, you know, that's actually my favorite part of the book. I also was getting to the sort of at around the 2/3 mark. I was like, okay, but where are we going? Feeling that you were getting, but when that final plot line really locked in, I was like,
when they kidnap Suhan and then everything just really goes to shit.
I love the kidnapping of Suhan because the book does such a great job of making her a non-entity. Like, yes, she's such total set dressing. You know, when we see her like in the brothel as the white man, the head of Three Steel's, like, you know, mistress and baby mama. The white man is not a white man. They only call him that because of the tattoos that cover his body, rendering him impervious to harm. The only white men in this book are drunken sailors who make a cameo appearance, completely peripheral to the plot, unimportant to the action, and that's as it should be. This is not a story about white people. And like when she gets kidnapped, she's like, okay, we're moving a prop from point A to point
Right.
B. And the book,
She's such a sexy lamp, and then it turns out that this was entirely deliberate on her part.
exactly, it's so good. It's like, this, not only is she crucial to the plot, but she's also incredibly dangerous, and and that was like deliberate protective coloring the entire time. And I love that she gets to do like the old matriarch witch thing at the end and come and curse everybody as she's like literally bleeding out. uh
Yes.
It's real chunky good stuff, and the book absolutely gulls you until the truth is revealed, and then it makes sense.
Right. There's this whole thing where they're kidnapping her, and you're like, I can understand why you're doing this, but wow, this is, yet another like step in your corruption arc. And then it's like, oh no, this was just a bad idea for so many reasons.
Yes, this is a gigantic mistake that you have made.
And, and I really, I mean, like, Suhan is she's such a great character, and her entire arc, and I mean, like, the arc of them sort of slowly trying to befriend White Bone Shifter?
Mm-hmm.
The shape-shifting gang. So every gang in this world has made, or in Singapore at least, has made a deal with a god. And,
yes.
And that gives them, and then they get a tattoo to show their pact with the god, and that gives them powers. So, they're with, the butterfly lady, they gives them fire powers, and 3 steel gives them this invulnerable skin, I think, is the main thing they get. And then the White Bone gang gets to be shapeshifters. So,
and are thus looked down upon, because that's sort of a sneaky, underhanded ability.
Right, which is it's so great of this sort of organized crime hypocrisy. Like any of you people have a single inch of moral ground, and yet, of course, they find ways.
They're the only gang besides the butterflies to allow women in, and the butterflies are all female, so they're like the only co-ed gang, and that like feeds into the disdain with which they're held, because like this sort of hiding and shape-shifting is a feminine coded ability.
Right. Plus, I mean, they're gender bending, right? Because some of the really good shapeshifters can completely copy entirely other people, across gender. And so there's definitely they're kind of, those are the gay ones.
Right. And this is part of how it tempers the romanticism around this sort of criminal world, because like the stereotypes and prejudices that are present in the larger society are recapitulated here and even heightened. And then even, the red butterfly has to have the same sort of, there can only be one leader, and we have to, fight and have internal struggle about who's going to be the leader, and it's going to, hurt us and tear us apart every time, stuff that they're like taking from the structures of all of the male dominated gangs and bringing into themselves, that it still all like trickles down and down and down into, even this sort of relatively isolated bit. And then on top of that, like one of the other big themes here is that these local gods, which are basically ethnic divides, right? Even on a tiny level, in like down to like what village did you originally come from kind of level.
Yeah, ethnic might be it might be a little, but it's tied into where people's home ancestral counties are.
Exactly.
And
it's very much about blood.
About lineages, which is different, because adoption is still a functional part of this. Adoption, marrying in, but it is about lineages.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff in the book that's like literally about blood.
Yes, like, I mean they're making drugs out of blood, to have magical effects.
Yeah, and one of the quotes that I wrote down here, and some of these might change because we had a sort of uncorrected proof, but says, "Blood was only blood, how ridiculous! But in the process of immigrants and their necessary gods, it had become alchemized into something worth more value and more doubt than it should be worth." Right. Mm. So this is not a book that's like uncomplicatedly presenting, the magic is in the blood.
Right.
This book is very interested in questioning, how does the magic come to be in the blood, and why in this particular community of exiles is the blood suddenly so much more important than it used to be.
Yes.
And like that it is in sort of trying to draw these distinctions and to remain distinct in this kind of like melting pot port of convenience that these divides begin to carry this like special magical, significance to the people who have them that they might not even have back where they came from. I use the term melting pot advisedly. A melting pot is what the new government is trying to create to forge a new Singaporean identity. The focus on blood is a way of resisting this.
Yeah, it's true. And one of the things I did think was interesting is that the book, I felt like, was kind of vague about how much of this is going on outside of Singapore.
I think that's the thing about the triads. Like the triads are
Right.
outside of China. That's that this is where they become these like sort of powerful mythical entities. And yeah, no, I think that all of this stuff is supposed to be very
Right, but
specific.
like, what's going on in Hong Kong, I wonder?
Right.
What's going on in Macau?
And it's moving away from, and like the whole sort of, overarching plot of the politics in the book is that the gangs are being driven out of Singapore because Singapore is attempting to assert itself as a nation state.
Yes.
And not as one of these sort of like, pirate bay. That's an unfortunate choice for it. Not one of these ports of convenience that like
right.
That nobody owns because it's easier for everybody involved, but nobody owns them. Singapore used to be that and is now trying to suddenly take on the mantle of nationhood that will allow it to enter the sort of community of nations, and that means that this particular thing has to be purged.
Yes. I mean, at this point, the country is like, well, depending on when you date it back to, is between like 8 and 20 years old. So
exactly. No, I mean, it's very much in the process of, and I mean, it's in the process of seeing whether the project of its own nation is going to succeed or not. That's certainly not guaranteed.
No, absolutely not.
And, and sort of part of the decision making that is like saying, okay, how can we make this succeed is, because that's the other thing about organized crime is that the existence of organized crime is very convenient when there is like political violence that needs to be done that shouldn't be done by cops.
Yes, well, I mean, also the existence of organized crime is more, the existence of these ethnic gangs is a lot more convenient when you're under British and then Japanese colonialism.
Yes.
But that like Singapore is, but when suddenly it's 75% ethnically Chinese city state, then the dynamics of being a Chinese ethnic gang vis-a-vis your government changes.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the book does a very neat job of painting the portrait of this very complicated geopolitical situation and making it like part and parcel of the fun plot that's going on. So you sort of absorbing all of this as you delve into sort of the magic and the intrigue and all of that, which I think is very cool. And actually, one of the other things that I want to talk about is, speaking of Japanese occupation, like I felt that even though the book doesn't speak about it very often, relative to how much it talks about it, all of the other things that are going on, I think that like the specter of the Japanese occupation is very much present in the historical traumas that are motivating the various parts of the plot. Both in like we have Yellow Butterfly, right?
Right.
And Yellow Butterfly is a person who was like a former inheritor of the Red Butterfly God's power, who became consumed by her resentment and revenge, and burned everything down, like burned an entire like neighborhood down essentially. Because the sort of part of the deal with Red Butterfly is that not only do you get fire powers, but you also get a sort of Mercedes Lackey-esque sympathy for the needs and pain of women.
Mm-hmm.
And so this person became, essentially overwhelmed by the degree of like, pain and suffering, resentment that she could feel from this history, and retaliated by, essentially destroying everything. And so we're like, there's dealing with the weight of, specifically the history of violence against women, but also like, the violence that was perpetrated on this community, which dovetail also in the like vivisecting that is happening. In when we discover that in the drug lab that these doctors are doing these, horrible experiments on living human beings underneath the city.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
I think that's also meant to sort of bring up the specter of what happened under Japanese occupation. If you're not sure why I'm calling this a link to Japanese occupation, systematized near industrialized bodily violation during and leading up to World War II is not just a German thing. In addition to the widespread official practice of sex slavery known as the comfort women, there are also sanctioned vivisectionists like Unit 731, which I don't recommend looking up unless you've got a strong stomach. I don't think it's an accident that the most visible victim of the body modification we see in this book is Filipina. A lot of real downers this time around. In addition to having a thematic tie to violence against women specifically because of the sort of the putative purpose of this is to create these, supernaturally attractive prostitutes.
Well, and there's a brief mention. I had to pull it up about, because the sex work is a major issue in this book, and there's the thing where they're talking to the older woman, and she's like, well, first the British banned their women from the trade, and then when I was young, this whole stretch was Japanese houses, and then those were ousted. Now it's the Chinese. And then, she says, no matter who runs the country, no matter where the girls come from, the city will always need warm bodies that can be bought.
Yes. And it's sort of the question that comes up is the degree of coercion that is involved. Because, of course, in the case of the Japanese, as we know with the sort of the history of...
There's definitely the specter of comfort women.
Exactly.
Well, never actually mentioned by name in this book. That's definitely, something that is in this memory.
Mm-hmm. And it's questioning, okay, to what extent are any of these people actually consenting to this? Like these forms of power and subjugation and desperation, are move people into these environments, and there's always going to be a need for warm bodies, etc. But also, there's the horrifying, body destroying, active sex slavery version of this, and then there's another version of this.
Right. I mean, you get to see sex workers who are sort of in a variety of different contexts, some, including retired and madams, and some who, are working for sort of brothels that aren't great, and some, and some that are working for brothels that are okay, and some who are, smuggled in Vietnamese and Filipino women who are just being pumped full of drugs and not allowed to ever leave their building.
Right. Which is the which is where evil is located, even in an environment and in a story where like a bunch of people are vying for power and morally compromising themselves and dealing with the situation as it stands in ways that you could say are better or worse. There is definitely actual no kidding evil, and that's what that is in this book's moral universe.
Yeah, but there's definitely a sort of a sense of none of these options are great.
Yes.
And sex work is one of a variety of options that, depending on which kind you happen to fall into, maybe better or worse than other jobs in organized crime. But none of these options are great, including, like when we open the book, it's not like Adeline is happy at her fancy Christian school. She's getting pretty horribly bullied, and then her friend's mom, or I guess her mom's friend, is like, even her options were somewhat constrained, and she had to go and beg for help from the gangs at one point.
Yeah, and not to mention that, like, attempting as Adeline's mother does, to basically sell out her god in order to attain this, capitalist cosmopolitan version of power
Well, and I think also just to attain is like she's
or
trying to get a
safety, I
sense
should
of
say.
safety, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like she's
Well, that's the promise of that cosmopolitan version of like wealth, is that it provides safety, that it's a respite from all of this chaos that has been going on, because these it establishes norms that have rules, and the police are a huge part of that allows the part of society, as long as you can get into it, to function. And unfortunately, Adeline's mother does not actually pull off the bargain, because as with most mob stories, it's tough to get out of the life.
right. But I like I think I like about like any kind of Jiang story, whether it's a martial arts one or a gang one, is when they make it is when it is clear that this is not actually a good life. um,
This is not exactly your classic Jianghu setting, but there are inlets and straits, if not rivers and lakes, so close enough. It takes place in that parallel, unreal world of violence and adventure. The place that you can only access if you're a saint, or a hero, or a demon, or a wizard, or a lesbian.
but
Yes.
it's still like you understand why they're getting sucked into this, but it's still actually kind of awful and brutal. And so like you understand why her mom is trying to get out, and you also understand why she can't. Um,
Yeah.
Among other things, if you're the single living avatar of a angry fire goddess, then probably becoming a moderately prosperous shopkeeper is not going to be it's not going to be something that she's just gonna shrug and let you do.
Yeah, because that goddess is resentful and violent.
Yes.
But I think that related to this is the way that, like, Adeline manages to get two kinds of, like, very uh of revenge on her bullies. She both gets
Yes.
to, like, physically injure her bully, and then to, like, well, I guess I'm the only one who can save your life, and I'm going to do it because I'm begrudgingly the bigger person, kind of revenge on her
Yes.
bullies.
Which I really liked that moment also, just because I really like the points where she gets to step out of this milieu and into some, getting like glimpses of other lives. Because it just reminds us that this is still a teenage girl.
Yeah, and that this is a choice that she's making,
Right.
and that the milieu outside of the gang zone not only still exists but is growing. I
Yeah.
mean, this is what the future actually looks like. Yeah.
Well, yes, and of course, this is part of why the gangs are getting so violent and so vicious, is that they had, a sort of vaguely functional balance of power, and now that their territory is shrinking, I mean, there's a really vicious fight for who's going to be the last one standing. Partly, like because the Fanka, the white man of Three Steel, uh, he is trying to do the same thing that Adeline's mother is trying to do. Of okay, we need to be safe, we need to sell out, but his plan is to consolidate all the organized crime so that they can just sell out directly to the government.
Right. Exactly. Before we completely move on from it, though, the thing that I wanted to say about her getting revenge on her bullies is that I really enjoy how, like, completely unsatisfying it is.
Oh, it's yeah, no, it's like she's doing this, and I love the moment where she's trying to imagine how they're going to talk about her.
And it's like, even when she gets like the exact thing that you would hope for in this situation, if you were a teenage girl who had been bullied, she's like, oh man, that was just exhausting and unpleasant.
Right.
You know? And doesn't really have anything to do with the life that I want to lead.
Right. And like the best case scenario there in terms of her revenge is that everyone's going to have to be like, I can't believe that it was Adeline who saved us. But like, she's not even going to get to be there to hear to reap any social benefits. She is so complete. I mean, you're right that it sort of drives that this is a choice that she's making, but it also really drives how completely distant she's gotten from that life.
Exactly.
Like, it's kind of a choice she's making, but also she has changed so much that the narrative makes it clear that, a person in that position could theoretically go back, but she has changed so much that she, Adeline, I don't know if she could.
I think that this is sort of the point of how central tattooing is to all the magic here.
Yeah.
Because like the point is that once that being in this environment changes you permanently. Like, there's an extent to which you can walk it back, but you're not even, as a dumb 16-year-old, you're not going to be able to fully expunge yourself of the decisions that you've made here. And
right. Well, and we get to watch her sort of get tattoos in more visible places.
Right. As it becomes clear that this is in fact the life that she has chosen to lead.
Yes. And that, she's making it in so many ways harder and harder for her to go back.
Yeah. And I think that we should talk about one of the reasons that she decides to do this.
Yeah. Let's talk about Tien.
That is exactly what I was about to say. That one of the reasons that she's chosen this life is because it's the one with the hot girl in it.
Tien is a great love interest, incidentally. Like,
she is. She's so cool.
She's so cool.
But she's also like not, she's also fronting, and she's also like, weak in some ways, and unreliable and impulsive, and, and young in so many ways. And part of Adeline's arc is becoming disillusioned with Ang Tien while she continues to be in love with her, which I think is a really neat trick.
Yeah. And just like Tien doesn't stop being cool even as she becomes like more sort of vulnerable and a mess. Like, as it turns out, that her, cool bike is a gift from her estranged brother, which incidentally, I love that we do get to meet the estranged brother, and he's just like, yes, he's a gangster, but he's mostly just kind of a guy.
Yeah. A token good man, in fact.
Yeah, no, actually, he's a pretty good token good man, isn't he? He's trying, despite being a gangster. He's trying to be a good estranged brother. But also, like, just the whole thing with Tien and Peckmoon is really interesting.
Very
because,
interesting.
You've got this thing where it's like, where first Adeline is spending so much time trying to figure out, are they romantically involved? What is going on with them? Peckmoon hates her. Tien likes her. Is she, like, what kind of messy love triangle situation is she getting into? And then, like, Peckmoon up and vanishes, and it doesn't make things better at all.
No, in fact, there's a real way in which it makes things much worse.
Yes.
Because Peckmoon was sort of the thing keeping them on the rails, in some ways. And yeah, no, it's just good character writing and good, like, delving into a relationship in a way that, like, I feel, it doesn't have to, like, have, big thematic, weight to it, because there's so much else in the story that has big thematic weight. This is just like an interesting and affecting, romantic and personal plot about, expectations from each other.
Yeah. Well, and, I mean, I think it has the heightened emotions that you would expect of two teenage girls. And while still, I don't know, it felt emotionally very realistic. All of its ups and downs, none of them felt contrived or stupid. It was like, yes, this is exactly what these two absolute messes would be doing in this. Really three, because Peckmoon is absolutely part of this. Just complete and utter messes are going to be doing. And so should we talk about what happens to Tien?
Yeah, that is definitely another a thing that happens in this book is that our we it's 1972, so we're burying our gays.
Right. Well, yeah, Tien dies. Well, honestly, I don't think it's not the gay part. Like, this is again, this is what happens in this kind of story, and like in a good Jianghu story, is like you have to have your horrible loss.
Yeah, and like I obviously don't think that's what this story is doing, is burying its gays, but I also
Right.
think that like it's important. Like this is not a Queer Desires the Revolutionary Moment story. Like I think it's actively anti that. Um,
Mm.
I think that it is. I think that it's interested in queerness and interested in the history of queerness. Um, but I think it is also like very much this is a love interest. This is what
Right.
that is. And like we're we're not interested in the emerging narratives of queerness in the straight world. Is like that is there are a bunch of these like contemporary newspaper stories that keep showing up in the novel.
Oh yeah, the
Um,
one, and actually the one about lesbians.
Yeah, which like ends up getting burned, and it's like, no, that's not what we're doing here. We're doing something else here. We're not, we're not like A, we're not hiding, and B, we're not suffering in that way. But C, we're also not like, uh, we're not putting this on the pedestal as the thing that is going to give our lives meaning. This is just
Right, which and all of which come up as pull quotes in that article, right? Is that these women who are, you get, because you just, I love that you just get all these like little pull quotes from the article about, you know, the secret. Oh, look, lesbians, they're a thing.
Mhm. Which I think
And
is a
some of
genuine
them,
article, if I
yes,
remember
it is.
the author's notes
I
correctly.
believe it is. Yes. And but I think it's used really well here because it's not all of one thing. Like some of the pull quotes are about how hard it is, and some of the quotes are about how transformative it is, and some of them are about how this has changed my life, and I don't know if it's for the better or for the worse. Um, and all of that has this strong emotional resonance for Adeline, but she's operating in such a different environment right now where like the fact that she's gay is the least important thing she's got going on right now.
Exactly, exactly, and yeah, I think that's the sort of the context in which through which one should examine Ang Tian's death.
Yes. Though I mean, it's worth noting that she gets pulled, the underworld and the gay underworld are at this point kind of the same thing because, there's just only so many places that the outcasts can go.
Hmm.
And so, like you have first of all, the butterfly gang is mostly queer, of one
Yeah,
sort or another. I mean, some of them have boyfriends, but some of them are trans and lots of them are lesbians, or bi. And and of course, and then you've also got your shapeshifters. So and also the people that they are surrounded by who aren't part of the organized crime are also, that's also where you're getting a lot more queer people, including a lot of sex workers, partly because these are the people they're shaking down for protection money.
yeah,
Like they're at this again, it seems so cool and utopian, and then no, actually the people that you're not preying on the rich, you're preying on your fellow poor disenfranchised queer people,
mm.
including also the immigrants.
It is wonderfully complicated.
Yes, and the things that kill Tien are organized crime, and in particular this sort of like tightening heightened violence that's happening in the organized crime world.
I think there is, but I think that there's also like there's an element of it which is sort of an older, more visceral horror to get back to the blood stuff.
Yeah.
Because I mean, one of the things that is happening down in that lab, in addition to, the fascist human experimentation thing, is just like the form that it takes is blood mixing. Um, and the idea of like losing your old identity and being lumped into this new state, and like the emergence of an identity as Singaporean that overwrites everything that you took, that since this is a nation of immigrants, everything that you brought with you. I think that there's sort of an old fear of that kind of thing, of that kind of, monstrousness and loss of, like, lumped together monstrousness and loss of identity.
Yeah,
And
though I think it's a little. I don't. I think you might be overreaching just a bit because again, these are mostly all Chinese ethnic gangs, and
true.
so all of the the blood that they're feeding each other is blood from other gangs, and in particular, it's and like Tian and her brother are part of different gangs. I think it's more. I think it's less about overwriting an ethnic identity because, as you pointed out, this is these are the Chinatown gangs. I think it is more about loyalty.
Mm.
It's overriding. It's forcing you to have loyalties, or I mean, it's trying to reap the benefits of these sworn loyalties without actually having to swear. Like that is what he's trying to do.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah, I like that a lot.
And so, it's not, I mean, it's not quite cultural appropriation per se, but it is about you want the benefits of, because this is actually what I was trying to say earlier about how it's not about the about it being lineages, is that the lineages don't necessarily have to be about father son or parent child, or brothers.
It's a disruption to the system that parent child stuff is happening, because
right.
that's not how it's supposed to happen.
The fact that you have these two people, Adeline and Suhan's son, who are, have been, and even that it's partly about parent child, but in that case, it's more about gestation. But so these lineages they're about sworn loyalties. They're lineages of sworn loyalties, and so part of that is about you want to reap the benefits without getting the sacrifice, and part of the horror is being forced to, when they're force feeding these god blood drugs to Adeline when she's kidnapped, and then to Tian when it kills her, injecting her with it, is about this sort of forced assimilation, not across ethnic or cultural lines, but across these lines, these bonds of loyalty and responsibility and sort of like reciprocal obligation.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. So it is like overriding these social frameworks that have, given like logic and meaning to lives for generations, with this new thing, which you have to take on board whether you want it or not.
Right, and like it's not like the old thing was necessarily great. We can see. I mean, part of what made Adeline's mom friends with her business partner is that her business partner's boyfriend got kidnapped randomly. So it's not like it was a great system before, but it was a system, and that system is being disrupted. And anytime you disrupt a system, you're going to get horrible violence. And in particular, this particular, and like I think that the way that Van Gogh wants to reap all the benefits of organized crime, he still wants all of that power, but he wants it without without the reciprocal part of the obligations.
I think that's true. I think there's also like another element to it that touches on women's body image, beauty.
Oh yeah, no. Also, the whole thing with the, I mean, the broader project is about that. But yes, let's talk more about specifically the white bone blood making the perfect beautiful sex worker project.
Right, but I mean, I think that goes like hand in hand with what you were talking about before, because one of the things about this, the creation of this sort of like power without obligation bit, because the structures of power remain in place, and the responsibility to give back to particular communities or to have a reciprocal arrangement with particular communities is lost, is also that there is then only one structure of what is desirable.
Yes.
Sort of in terms of economic and political power, but also in terms of like aesthetics and beauty.
Right. And so they're taking these women from all over Southeast Asia, and they're like force feeding them something. And that is actually where it does cross ethnic lines, right? They're force feeding them these Chinese god blood to all make them this sort of perfect, idealized, perfect woman.
Yes, I mean, and it's the perfect woman as construed by this like emerging, consensus state. Uh, so yeah, no, I think that ties very neatly into what you were saying.
Yes, and of course at the same time, like there's an acknowledgement that there is no one perfect woman. I mean, part of what they're being fed is shapeshifter magic,
Right.
and part of what makes because the one of the early mysteries in the book is figuring out what is going on in this one brothel that suddenly they're stealing everybody's clientele, and we never ever ever see the women outside of there except when they come out as horribly deformed bodies with like extra teeth. um, and and part of what is making them so appealing is that they can be somewhat chameleon like, that they can shift to they're all being turned into a certain type, but they can tweak that based on based on the sort of subconscious or conscious desires of the client.
Yes. And I think that this sort of that there's a comment on this in one of the why can't I remember the word for it? When you put the quotes in front of the book to and the quote.
Blurb?
No, in the book,
In the epigraph?
Yes, thank you. That's the one. There's a there's a quote from a contemporary newspaper article that kicks off the book, which reminded me of Daughters of Chaos, because it's from a contemporary like editorial about how these foreign prostitutes are bringing in all these diseases in Singapore, and that this constitutes a threat to like the polity, and so that they need to be eliminated. Uh, and there's sort of this interesting like tension in the like this imagining that what is in that newspaper quote meant to be venereal disease is in this construction this sort of like homogenizing shape-shifting god blood, which is doing away with like these distinctions between people. It's I don't think it's a resolved like concept. I think that there's like a lot of tension to it.
Yeah.
And you can read it like in a variety of different ways. That's the verbal equivalent of me shrugging my shoulders.
That's actually a plot progression thing that I really enjoyed. I liked how that theme built until eventually it sort of takes over the novel. You think that it's going to be about tracking down who killed her mother, and then the answer is selling out killed her mother. But this other thing that, we thought was related ends up being the whole theme of the novel. Also, I really enjoyed, while we're on the topic of these shape-shifting sex workers, is the sort of smaller plot thread about the one who really, really, really takes to the drugs and just goes absolutely feral and like murders a bunch of people with her bare teeth.
Oh yeah. And then it turns out that she's probably going to survive the process and is going to become this like the new sort of, a new member of White Bone, and therefore like this new interesting kind of power.
Right, which is really interesting. It in your sort of, this is, things are mixing because she's Filipina.
Yes.
This is a Chinese ethnic gang, but they're like, well, our god likes her, so yeah, sure. But I think that this also speaks to how White Bone is different from all the other gangs. I mean, Red Butterfly also takes in a broader swath of people. You've got the two gangs that accept women are the two gangs that are already sort of trespassing what's acceptable criteria for admission, because they're actively recruiting from a broad pool of outcasts. And in the case of White Bone, they're mostly just concerned about competency.
I guess I had one more thing that I wanted to talk about with Adeline, which is that I think that it's made very explicit that one of the reasons that she, not just like there's the hot girl here, but like one of the reasons that she goes so hard into Red Butterfly is that she was just completely isolated and lonely where she used to be.
Right. Suddenly there's cool girls being nice to her.
Right. And it's like one of the like appeals of these kind of organizations, of these gangs, is, I mean, in this book it's both homosexual and homosocial. but like the homosocial part is actually really important, and
Yeah.
maybe more important to Adeline, in on a fundamental level, is like if she had been able to form these connections in her previous community, none of this might have happened.
Right.
If she'd been able to like thread the needle with her old childhood best friend turned rival and bully who she clearly had some sort of crush on, like then maybe this all could have been avoided for her. But
Yeah.
it's a lack of love both from her community and from her mother, who can't tell her the truth, that puts her in this position and makes her look for friendship and community and love. And the friendship and community and love that she finds is inextricably tied to violence.
Yes.
And but it's a powerful cocktail, those two things together. And that may be a sort of very sort of rudimentary observation to make about organized crime and organized crime stories, but I think that this book does a very good job of putting it across.
It really does, because I think by starting initially, I was like, why are we spending so much time in school? But by spending that much time on the schoolgirl dynamics, you get a really good sense of how lonely she is. And which also, it means that when Peckmoon is being mean to her, you understand why this isn't pushing her away, because she's used to being bullied. She's used to being the weird, crazy outcast. She's in fact been playing up how crazy she is as a way of dealing with her bullies all this time. And so the fact that one of the girls is being mean to her, but all the others are being nice to her, is still such a good ratio for her. I really enjoyed that even while she's having this sort of all-consuming romance with Tian, she's forming complicated friendships with some of the other girls as well. I mean, Christine, the tattooist, being the most, prominent, but like they just sometimes Tian isn't there and she's just hanging out with the other girls.
Yeah,
And
no, we haven't discussed the other girls much, including like the trans sex worker. But I think that they're all appropriately rich, given the amount of time that they spend in the narrative, and you do feel it when they die, as they do, sometimes quite abruptly, and sometimes off screen. It does a great job of creating this sense of like both community and precarity.
yeah, and like you do get a sense of sort of the butterfly gang as like Red Butterfly as a collective identity,
Yes.
and sort of starting to and how that sort of that like the gangs end up being characters, and individuals in the gangs are also characters, and I thought that was just really well done. The I was looking up the girl who goes feral, and it's Rosario Zaragoza, which again, like her, even just her name is so different,
Mm.
because everyone else has names that are mostly one Chinese language or another, or occasionally you get you get a Thai or Malay name, and of course you get a lot of Western names like Christina and Adeline, um, and so this Spanish Filipina name just like really stands out.
Absolutely. Since we're getting to an hour, I
Yeah.
think that and since we've been like, praising this book a lot, I wanted to maybe bring in a few things that I thought either didn't work as well or that I didn't entirely understand.
Mm.
I think, I'm not sure how, like, I understand like the thematic weight of the fire gives you, empathy toward the problem, toward like the pain of women bit. And it also like gives you the it also sort of tells you something about the nature of the god, but I think as an element of the plot, I don't know if it connected to anything. Um,
Yeah, it wasn't even, to me it almost felt more like sort of part of their self mythologizing than something that actually happened, because they're
mm,
actually fairly callous towards the pain of other women by and large.
this is true.
Like they care about women as a collective, but when it comes to individual women, I mean, I guess they're more empathetic towards them than most of the men around, but there's the moment where they're telling people, oh, you've got to stop being so nice to Suhan. She's our captive.
Yeah, and sort of by the same token, like the feeling of being like the one conduit of the god, the point where Adeline hands it over to Tien, like doesn't seem to change Adeline very much. I wish that there was like a little bit more consistency in terms of like, and maybe this vagueness is again because a lot of it is in your head or in the heads of these characters, but like, I would have liked a little bit more about, so what does it feel that the god is absent, or that you're being cut off from the god? Why is it that you only notice when you're trying to use the magic and it doesn't happen, and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, I think I thought a lot of I mean, just in general, the whole big conduit plot, is it going, who's going to be the next conduit? How are they going to do it? That was a lot of where it was dragging for me a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like part of the point of it is that this gang is mired in the same sort of like, toxic rivalry culture that the rest of the gang world is, but
it has the same problem of depression narrative where, yes, they're doing a good job of realistically portraying how frustrating and pointless all of this is, but it does mean that sometimes reading it feels a little frustrating and pointless too.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the conduit stuff feels like the thing that was sort of the most chaotic and not in a sort of a rewarding way.
Yeah.
On the read. But that's sort of it. Really, I really enjoyed this book.
Yeah. I actually, I just, I thought the ending really worked for me. We buried our cool love interest, which is unfortunate, but it just, I felt like, like Adeline gets her revenge, and at this point she's so transformed that she's not even really Adeline anymore. She's so transformed that the epilogue is in fact from Christina's point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, and the sort of like the becoming a sort of a soldier or a political figure on this level completely dehumanizes you is definitely part of the point. When you become, an avatar of the historical force, which is it's that kind of thing that I was, looking for in the previous development of that concept more. One final note that I wanted to make, speaking of the newspaper story, when I think it's Christine who says, like there were bars over our eyes, but we never had pictures before, about the, sort of the sensationalist story about, about gay women. That's good. That's really good stuff.
That was a great line.
And not an easy one to interpret either. It's a good thinker.
Yeah.
Are we done with this episode now?
We could say a lot more, but we're already at time, so.
Yeah. Let us end the episode then, and talk about.
We have no idea what we're doing next.
Yeah, it's probably going to be Direct Descendant.
Probably, yeah.
Through it.
All right.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Well, we're flirting with disaster. Let's find Adeline and ask her if she knows where all this unexpected fire's from. I bet she's got a hunch about spontaneous combustion, and ask her what that is. It's a bad way to go. To Adeline, we won't just sit around saying this is fine. Adeline, we're going to the Red Butterfly House today. Does anybody smell burning?